a game can do exactly what it set out to do, but a particular player may not like it because it's not their type of game.
Yes.
Or whatever. Like, is Elden Ring a good game for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely
No.
not.
But Elden Ring nailed it because they did exactly what they set out to do. And for the people who are into that kind of thing, it completely delivers on that, right?
Butterscotch shenanigans.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 585 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the weekly podcast for indie game developers. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and the web developer.
I'm Sam. This is a palindrome episode.
It sure is. We are Butterscotch Shenanigans. Today is August 7th, 2020. Quick! Before we get into the meat of the episode, we have a donation with a message from a supporter via moneygrab.bscotch.net, because we all know this podcast is, in fact, just a cash grab. We only do this for the money. So,
and now we've got new players coming from How Many Dudes, too. We've got new people accusing us of similar kinds of...
Yeah, we are a business, which does mean everything we do is unethical.
Every single thing.
So we got a message from a supporter via moneygrab.bscotch.net from Ribdot, who says, "Hey dudes, long-time listener, and wanted to say congrats on How Many Dudes release. However, your launch day discounts are no good here. So here's a tip for returning those savings to each of you. Round it up because boo cents. Keep it up, bros."
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
So thanks a lot. Appreciate that. And of course, if anybody else wants to support the podcast, you can just go to moneygrab.bscotch.net and
Let us grab our money.
Yeah, buy us a cup of coffee. We appreciate it.
It is literally a money grab.
Yeah,
Literally what it is.
yeah.
So,
Its only purpose is to give us money. It's
People say, if you want to get rich quick, just record 585 podcast episodes over the course of 11 years.
Make an
and,
average of $1.
yeah, we'll talk about the player feedback later. And I got a bone to pick on that department.
Yeah.
Because it just cracks me up. There's so many things like
Yeah,
that.
so we'll be talking about some How Many Dudes launch numbers now that it's been over a week since launch. We'll probably be talking a bit about player feedback, the good and the bad, how we've been trying to parse it, what kinds of traps there are.
This kind of continues the launch saga of our latest episodes, right? Because the 2 episodes ago was about, hey, we're about to launch. What does it look like to get ready for a launch? How do you plan for it? And the last one was, hey, we just launched just now.
What's that? What
does that look like? How do we feel? And now this one is, hey, we're a week out, which means now we're in that phase of the game is out, people are playing it, and we've had time to kind of sit and see what's going on. Fires are put out, and now we're trying to figure out, is everything fine? What's going on? What do we do next?
Mm-hmm. So we got some numbers that we will run through, and just to kind of recap what we talked about last episode. So last episode, we were only a few days out from launch, and we did hit that 100,000 sales in the first 50 hours on Steam. Our mobile data was lagging, so we didn't really have any data on the mobile side of things.
We could tell it was worse by a lot, but we couldn't tell.
Of course. Yeah.
And we were very cautious because of the question of the tail. So, you'll have that kind of spike in sales on launch day, but then whatever happens later is really kind of the determining factor for how successful the game ends up being for you financially, in the long run, right? Because it's like, if you get that one spike of money and no more money, that's a whole different thing than if it kind of persists. So we're starting to see how things are taking shape a little bit. So let's talk about it. So Sam, you want to run through the numbers?
Yep, I got you. So after 1 week of being on sale, finally, How Many Dudes has sold 175,000 Steam units, which is a lot.
It's still chugging. It's still chugging.
But you can already see that fall off, right? Because it was 100,000 the first 50 hours, and then the first 2 days, and then 5 days later, 5 whole more days, and we're less than another 100,000, right? So
Yep,
and that's all to be expected because of how typically all these discovery mechanisms work as far as, surfacing games, whenever streamers and stuff pick it up, it's all kind of happening all at once, right? That's the whole point of the peak. But Steam is very good at launching games, right? So if you're launching a game, there's not really a better place in terms of how all these things combine together to actually give you a moment to punch through all the noise that is kind of around. So
again, it doesn't just do it all for you, but all the tools are there
correct
to do but to have a really good launch.
We're also sitting at 1,763 reviews with 90.6% positive, which is very good.
Yeah. And it is, so reviews will not separate out by language on Steam until we hit 2,000 reviews. Yes. And then per language reviews also won't separate out until they have, I believe, 500 in that language, I think. Somebody can correct me on that if I've gotten that threshold wrong.
But it's something like that, yeah.
But we are seeing, so English is something closer to like 93 or 94% positive. And then the other languages are pulling it down a bit. And we aren't sure yet whether that's just, some kind of, cultural differences in terms of what people expect.
Yes, there are large cultural differences in how people review
It's presumably Chinese, because Chinese is because our biggest market is English speaking. That's 51%. And then, it's 50% roughly. And then Chinese at 33%. So that's a huge fraction, right?
And
Chinese users, culturally on Steam, Chinese users tend to just have more negative reviews. They bring more negative stuff into reviews rather than to forums and other kinds of places.
Right. Well, they tend to use the Steam review system just as a means of giving feedback, kind of with the to kind of pressure the devs a bit more to make changes that the communities want. And so
you'll generally see a lower overall review score in your Chinese language reviews.
Yeah, and this is here's the thing. That's fine.
Just how
people have their ways of communicating. And what's nice about Steam then is that because different people from different parts of the world may just view the purpose of the review system a little differently
and
than separating
what a score means differently.
Right. So like an 80% positive in the Chinese language is probably a pretty dang good game, right? Yep. Whereas in English, you got to be in the 90s for it to be probably a very, very good game, right? So yeah, well, it'll separate out once we hit that 2,000 threshold.
So some of the ratios that people look at when they're trying to figure out how well did a game do or trying to forecast stuff before launch is you look at this thing that people refer to as I don't know what the term is for it, but there's this wish list ratio is this idea. And it's just saying, given how many wish lists you have right before launch, so the moment before launch, you can expect a median of 15% of that number to turn into sales. So if you had 100,000 wish lists for week one.
Week one. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a week one wish list to sales ratio concept. Right. So ours has been.
And I guess the point of this is because people who haven't launched games yet, people who are analyzing games are trying to figure out how do we guess how well a game is going to do before we launch it? Right. Yeah. And so this is one of those tools where Simon Carles presumably and
there's a bunch of
and Chris Zukowski and others have gathered data from a bunch of people to figure out, okay, let's find some data points that are predictive, and wish lists are the thing that everybody has, right? So is there something that wish list numbers predict about launch? And so they came up with this metric, which is, okay, let's see people who have launched, look at their week one sales, look at the wish list they had coming in, look at what that ratio is, and then see what the range of those ratios are to figure out what kind of can you expect given your wish list numbers to your week one sales?
Yeah. And so the median, again, this is something that we use internally when we're just trying to think about as we're coming up on launch, okay, benchmarking our own expectations against probably what is going to happen. So the median is 15%. But again, that range goes all the way up over 100%, right? Because you think about maybe you came in with 10,000 wish lists, but that's because you didn't successfully manage to market the game pre-launch essentially, and then did actually get some streamers and stuff day one. And so you get this huge difference in there.
Yeah. People didn't know about your game until it launched and then it got popular. Right. So now there weren't any wish lists
Exactly. But for us, it was interesting because, of course, we were coming in with 308,000 wish lists. We sold 175,000 units. So our ratio there is 58%, right? So just an interesting number. Again, it doesn't mean anything for your game specifically, but it's an interesting, predictive question mark people always have. Is what does it mean? I'm coming into launch with all these wish lists or no wish lists. What does that mean?
All you can really say is were you above or below the median, but you can't really figure out why. And also obviously a higher number is better.
Or it's worse, honestly, because it means that you didn't successfully market the game pre-launch in a way, right?
Yeah. Which it doesn't mean either.
That's true. Mean either. It's just a number. It's just an interesting number.
It's the important thing about all statistics, right? Statistics are each one is trying to accomplish something, but they're all descriptive. Most of the time, it's just describing how things have happened, right? And you always care about is the range of things that can happen, and you want to look at those, right? But for any given case, any given single case, that thing doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that ours is 50 whatever percent and somebody else's is 15%.
Well, and
those are metrics we can use to then ask the question of why, like what's different between these two, because we see there's a difference, and now that gives you a handle to start.
But there's too many potential answers.
There's too many potential answers, and so it doesn't inherently mean anything.
Yeah. The other stuff that we look at then on our side, especially on the design side, is Steam provides that playtime histogram in the back end where you can see, okay, here's how many players have played your game, and then here's basically the fall off. So how many of them are left after 10 minutes? How many are left after an hour, 2 hours, all the way down to like 50 or 100 hours, I think is kind of where the last buckets are. So we've collected a few from other dev buddies and stuff, got a few comparison points, both with public data as well as kind of asking people directly. One of the public ones is Slay the Spire. There's like a histogram floating around, some picture.
Yeah, we mentioned this one before too, where the numbers are so high.
It seemed like a lie. We
reached out to double check because we were like, "Are you sure this is what these numbers are?"
Yes. But one of our goals is basically, one of the biggest annoying things, frankly, when you're making a game is seeing on your playtime histogram that like only 70% of people made it past the first 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like you made the whole game and someone bought it, which is crazy hard to do in the first place. But then still you have this funnel happening.
Honestly, though, I feel like if you see that is actually like a manageable problem, because it means that you fucked up the onboarding somehow, right? And the downside of that is if you have a very complex game, then refining the onboarding to be smoother.
Like Crashlands 2, for example, the onboarding is so complicated.
Yes. Yeah, the onboarding takes like 2 hours because there's so many game systems that unfold over time, right? But that does mean that if you're layering in those systems like that, then there's just more opportunities for people to get lost, which again, it comes just down to if you're making a complicated game,
it's complicated.
People fall off, right? So it's
one of the cool things with MA Dudes is our current, basically that 10-minute bucket is 97%, which is the highest we have seen. That is the highest that we've seen somebody else get to. Slay the Spire is 97%. It's actually higher than Balatro's by 2%. And then as you go down, the numbers are still kind of coming in. So every day it's actually been all the numbers have been going up, right? Because we're selling so many units right now that we're getting so many new players per day that it's kind of like.
And new players start at 0, so they pull it.
New players start at 0.
That's the thing to remember anytime you're looking at your own stats is you have to ask, what is the background context of these stats, right? And for a new game launch, most of your players, if the launch is going well, you have a high churn is not quite the right word, but you have a high churn rate of new people coming in who are going to be constantly diluting your stats for what the current players are doing, right? Yeah. And so it's not until you get past the launch window and are kind of more of a steady state where you can get a better sense of
what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing that's kind of weird about our case is because we have a demo. It's like we actually have players who have sent us screenshots where they have over 1,000 hours in the demo.
Yeah.
If that person buys the full game, that playtime does not transfer to the full game.
Yeah, which is interesting.
They just reset back to 0. And so the demo, we suspect, and it's also based on, what proportion of your full game players were demo players. Mm-hmm. So even if somebody plays the demo for a couple of hours and like, oh, I like this, I'll buy the full game. That's 2 hours of playtime that could have gone into the full game, but didn't.
Mm-hmm. And so something like nearly half of our players play the demo
so those Adam ran some numbers on it because we have some flags in the back end for this, and it's a minimum of 53,000 of the Steam purchasers,
which is a little less than a third, right?
And probably closer to like 82,000 people played the demo, which is crazy. And again, we're trying to figure out how to think about this exactly, because it's like, well, 500,000 people played the demo, so it's like, okay, if 82,000 of those people bought the game, that seems really good, but also there's no comparative data.
It would be like a 15% rate of people.
Yeah. And this is not something that Steam flags for you in any way, which is crazy on the back end as a dev, right? Even though they know that an account, say, played the demo and wishlisted your game.
Well, and when you get the full game, the demo goes away.
Yes.
So it's not like you can even have both at the same time.
Actually, does it still? Because I saw a few people who were like accidentally launching the demo.
There's a lag time on it, I think.
What it is? Okay.
It's not like instantaneous, but so it's like, Steam does basically treat a purchasing player as somebody who's essentially like transferred from the demo to the full game. But the playtime just gets lost.
Yeah, and then it flags for you, which is really annoying because that would be a useful benchmark to understand, like, basically the effectiveness of a demo, or is your demo in some ways like somehow eating some sales for you. There's all sorts of question marks there, but you can't really get at it because there's no standardized data format that everyone has for this.
And like in Steam's defense, Steam still does have the best mechanism we've seen for demos and all that. But it is still lacking all of these, what we would consider kind of like basic analytics about trying to determine the efficacy of it.
Yeah.
And we are still clinging to the top 100 sellers list. So we're at number 94 today. Probably will not be
Today
off
is the
by
day.
time podcast airs.
Today
Holding
we
on by the
fall
skin of
off.
our teeth.
Yep. And we're actually, the game's still chugging along at 11,000 units. per
Somehow
day.
Marvel Rivals just they took us out. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
out
that's
fun.
what happened. I think that's the problem.
But yeah, again, we're just chugging like 11,000 units per day. We fully expect this to fall off very hard in the coming week.
Well,
And the
there's
reason is
still our launch discount still applies for a whole week.
Yep.
Left, right. So yeah. So I think we all expect it to now or after this weekend, I don't know, but soon start the fall off process, and then I'm guessing that once the discount goes away, that's when we'll see the first like
Chonk.
real drop. It actually bring us closer to whatever the tail really
Yeah.
is.
Like,
but,
will it be a 50% drop, a 90% drop, 95% drop?
well, no.
Yeah. So again, like, you know, when we were talking about this in the previous episode, we had a lot of, we were excited about how it went, but no real optimism about where it's going to go because who the hell knows, right?
It goes down. It always goes down.
It always
goes
goes down.
down.
We're
Yeah.
optimistic in the sense that because of what the numbers already have been, like the game's paid for itself. It's probably paid for the next year of development after that, right? So it definitely went well and put us in a good position, right? The question is how much better on top of that, right?
Yeah.
Did it, yeah.
And yeah, so we fully expect this to fall off. But the thing is, we have our other games to compare it to. And, you know, we launched Crashlands last April. So this is a very recent game for us, not like a 10-year-old thing. And at this point, 7 days out, the Crashlands 2 tail was down to 900 units per day versus how many dudes at 11,000 units per day. So again, that's a big difference. And
10x.
that's what we're kind of like, okay, we think we're in a slightly different category here.
Well, maybe because how many dudes right now? A large amount of our traffic is still coming from various featuring things that Crashlands 2 didn't have.
Mhm.
So things on the homepage, if you look at the personal calendar, there's this like games released last month, and how many dudes is just going to be on there.
Yep.
For a while, right? And so Crashlands 2 didn't have that, and
The
so
visibility landscape is very different than Crashlands 2.
so which is basically a consequence of the fact that how many dudes did so well initially that it's getting those featuring spots, right? But Crashlands 2 didn't get those feature spots, so it didn't have as big of an initial burst, which also means its tail just kind of collapsed right away.
Yeah. And we've also been having consistent, like Moist Critical, the YouTuber, just keeps publishing videos that are getting
He's just in a
100+
dude
thousand views.
mood.
Yeah.
He's
so
in a dude mood.
yeah, there's still enough like stuff going on with the promo side of what the game is up to that there's stuff that's like keep like buoying whatever is going on, and a lot of it's happening, and all of it is stuff that Crashlands 2 didn't have, right? And at some point, all of it goes away, and it puts us kind of back into where something
it's
more
kind of
like
like
what
Steam
Crashlands
selling
2
the
is
game.
dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. At that point, it's just whatever's going on Steam baseline, and we're not there yet, so we don't have a good sense of like we're not really comparing apples to apples here with Crashlands 2.
Well, we are in a sense of we're comparing a launch to not a launch. We know that it only
recent
goes
launch,
down. So it's like, you know,
it's sure it's like in terms of like what a launch can be. But in terms of like, is this about how many dudes? And there's a bunch of it that definitely is, right? Versus is this about what Steam is like right now, right?
Mhm.
And right now, we
I will say, I
disentangle
do
those
think
two things.
the personal calendar does favor
It seems to
these
be
so
very
well,
helpful.
and especially with that whole like last month's games thing. I think that will provide a much nicer fall off than how sharp it used to be when you would be like, you're off popular up and coming, nothing else for
You're
you.
done.
You're off
You don't
top
exist
sellers,
anymore.
nothing else for you. You know, I think it'll be very different. But we'll know in a couple weeks. But I think the important note is that basically by passing a week of time and seeing it still this high, I know for me personally, because again, we've been kind of anxious about what it all means, right? For me personally, on like, I think it was Wednesday night or something, I watched Moist Critical play one of his YouTube videos, and he was just like giggling like a kid in a candy shop kind of the whole time. And just had I just had like big
just
smile on my
vibing.
face. He's just vibing. And we did a bunch of math that day to kind of like figure out what these finances were looking like, because it looked like it was kind of finally in at least some kind of tail capacity as opposed to just,
kind of flattened out.
Yeah, kind of flattened out. And then I accidentally like sort of scrolled and was watching some shorts that were just regular people. This isn't stuff where I'm like trying to find someone who has like influence. It was just people who are posting videos of themselves playing Anime Dudes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. They're just like, I did this cool thing.
Yeah. And again, like some of them, I mean, one of them was like a guy getting the nuclear codes, like figuring out how the nukes work, and then the video is just like seeing it go off for the first time. But a lot of them don't have many views. They're just kind of like someone vibing. And I don't know, it just put like such a big, dumb smile on my face. Because I finally, it's like, again, we talk about how abstract this shit is when you're doing game dev. You're just looking at charts in the back end. You're not doing a concert for people. You can't tell, like you're just looking at
there's no emotional feedback,
Or it's like largely the feedback you're hitting is the negative stuff almost extensively. Like, right, as far as like where you're trying to search out patterns.
That's what you're looking for, yeah. You're trying to
which we'll get to. Yeah,
but like, I think it's also even the stuff that's like not really about negative or positive. When you're looking at coverage, like you're saying, like we're looking at Moist Particles videos, and we're looking at these like or Northern Lion, which we'll probably talk about also. Mm-hmm. We're seeing people who we think of as like the big influential people who might have an impact on the game, and that's what we're looking at, trying to figure out like what is the impact these people are having on the game. Yes. But we're not looking at it to be like just how are people reacting to the game, and like we're seeing that in Discord, which is just people are having a blast and playing the game and talking about it, right? And but that's very different than being like, let me just scroll through videos of complete fucking randos, who of their own volition, with no reward whatsoever because they don't even have a following,
exactly,
are just making videos.
Saw something hilarious and they were like, I gotta make a video out of this.
And then you get to see a person. You get to see and hear a person doing it.
Yeah, I feel like I finally had the launch relief, to be honest with you, because like my wife was asking me, we talked about last week a little bit, like, why are you, seems like you're still stressed about it, even though the game launch has gone so smooth and like the biggest one ever. And again, it's like, well, you don't know what the tail looks like until at least a week out, right? You don't get a really good picture of that. And as that kind of firmed up this week, and then that kind of moment of like just kind of stumbling into just a bunch of people having a good time with it. I don't know. It finally like lifted it for me a little bit, where I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And I mean, for me, it's like the game is what it is because we are having so much fun playing it.
Yeah. Yes.
And so then like to make that and be like, I'm just having a blast playing this game, and it's just like my own go-to game now, even though I made it, which again, that's never really happened. Because
it's hard the whole time you're making it, so you're kind of it's kind of work.
And so then like putting that out in the world, and then having some people be like, I hate this, right? And it's like it's such a bummer that it really overshadows.
It always will,
so many other things.
Yeah, well, especially the fact that like you already know, like you're having fun with it, and also we can see again, like in the Discord, so many people having so much fun with it, right? But it's really easy. Also, the more something's just more visceral than others. So when somebody says something negative in a video you watch, right, that's just a much more like hits you right in the brain.
Oh yeah,
right. Versus like just reading a comment somewhere, So
and I mean, honestly, like because some of the comments are so negative that they actually kind of turn around into just being hilarious.
There was that one, that was
we got one negative review on Steam, which paraphrasing was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, and whichever developers made this should quit making games and like never touch a computer again. No actual feedback at all about
the absence of anything specific, and then that level of like
where it was like it was a negative review that was purely an insult with no other context. And we read it and we just started laughing.
Yeah, it does happen. But I think this is the interesting kind of, I think, bit for the episode, which is, okay, so let's say you've launched the game and now you've gotten past that first week of just like, again, it doesn't matter. Again, we're talking about it going very well, but
wait, hold on. But before we talk about that, we still need to talk about mobile. We forgot to mention our mobile numbers.
I'll mention briefly.
Mostly just to say what they are so people have a sense.
Yeah. The App Store sold 11,830 units.
Did that same week.
That's in the same week. Yeah, that's versus Steam's 175,000. And then Google Play also sold about 11,000 units. But we also have Play Pass players on Google Play. However, the data is super lagged, so we only know through Monday, basically the first 4 days. So we know that there's 33,000 Play Pass players as of
first, I guess, 4 days.
Yeah, as of Monday. Yeah. So that's the mobile numbers. And again,
something
those are
strange though is that the mobile numbers are flat. So like Steam had this spike on launch day, and then the sales kind of go off into a tail. On mobile, they're just completely flat.
Yeah, it's been pretty steady basically on both platforms, like around 1,500 units per day, essentially, right?
Yeah, and I think it's because mobile doesn't do game launches, really, right? Like Steam is about launches. Steam's everything about Steam's mechanics for how you promote a game and how everything's from the store.
That's your moment. That's your moment to actually get attention when you
launch.
Like punch through, right?
Yeah, mobile, they're like, throw it in the pile.
Yeah, and this is also why we
surface somehow or another.
Yeah, and this is also like we saw with Questions too. We probably need to dig into like the full numbers, but with Questions too, we talked about this a little bit too, where it was the same relationship, right? Like the vast majority of sales were on Steam. Mobile didn't do very well, but then over the subsequent months, as Steam settled into the tail, mobile kind of like had settled into its own tail, but its relative gap between like what happened at launch and the tail on mobile was much smaller. And so the relative share in the tail actually went up dramatically. But I can't.
But that's just because the launch was so bad. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not like the tail was great because the launch was bad.
The mobile launch, particularly.
The mobile launch, yeah. But like in this case with how many dudes, because we're talking about like, the balance of like 20,000-ish sales on mobile versus 170,000 on Steam, right? So we're talking like a little better than 10% between the two, right? And 15% or whatever, right? And that's for launch. But if they continue to stay flat and Steam falls kind of the way it normally does,
then the gap will close.
That gap will close a fair bit. So that in the tail, it might come out like go to the tail. But again, the net money that you make is the combination of the tail and the launch, right? So as a total sum, it still might not add up.
And so it's like we're not writing off mobile,
It wasn't so bad we're just writing it off, but it definitely wasn't good enough that we're like, we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, it is a nice supplemental chunk, but we won't know until the long term hits.
Yeah, and we still, I guess the 2016 when we launched Crashlands, this was the most interesting note because we looked back at the data. The Crashlands 1 sold like 70-something thousand units in its launch week on the App Store. Yeah.
So we're getting about 1/7 of the number.
Again, we're featuring. We're top paid, right? We're like number 3, I think, still on the App Store. We're in top 10, and on the App Store we're in top like 5 on the Google Play Store. So we're not invisible by any stretch. We got featuring and all that stuff. It's just like the stores
still
themselves.
Number 2 slot on top paid on Google Play.
Okay,
we dropped to 3.
The stores themselves just are not selling.
We were 2 when I just checked. Oh, so we went back up maybe. But
maybe. So it's around. So like I don't know. We'll talk more about the mobile stuff, I think, once we get the Play Pass numbers, because that'll determine whether it was worthwhile, basically.
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to make sure we got the full picture before we moved on to the feedback.
Not to completely sideline the rant, but just because I opened up to see. We are number 2 again on Google Play.
All right, good.
But I was just annoyed again because every time I open the top charts in Google Play, every single time resets to top free.
It always defaults to free, yeah.
But it's not even default, it resets. So if I move to a different pane and come back,
it's back to free. They really want to get you into those free games.
Yeah. So now let's say you're a week post launch with your game. The fires have been put out. More importantly, you're starting to see patterns and feedback, right, about your game. And the interesting thing that starts coming up around this period, and definitely always does for us too, is basically you have feedback about your specific implementation of certain kinds of mechanics in the game. And then you have feedback just about the shape of the game completely. And it's very hard to figure out, essentially, when you're seeing all this feedback come in, when it is something that you should change, right? How do you assess this feedback in a way that lets you put it to bed one way or another? Because it makes you anxious as fuck to just have like, well, should I be doing X, Y, or Z? Because these people are complaining about it, these loud people.
You got to have those moments where you're like, am I wrong? Or is everyone else wrong?
Yes. Or it's not about wrong, right? It's about what.
It's about framing and
it's about framing. It's about figuring out what's going on. And I think especially when it's a consistent pattern, which is what you're looking for. You're looking for, because if you have like if all your negative stuff is everything is different, then that's a good signal. It just means that there's no one thing that like people have come together and been like, I hate this, right? But if there's something consistent, then the question is that because we have a design problem with the game, or because this audience can't be served well by this game?
Right. Or basically is the shape of the game just inherently problematic in a certain way, which is what you refer to as like a cursed design problem in video games, right? Which is like there is no way to solve matchmaking perfectly, for example. matchmaking is a cursed problem because you
You're just
cannot.
side grades of
It's
various
always
sorts.
going to suck somehow.
Yep. And you can improve it. You can improve it a little bit, but it always ends up, it's always like
Yeah,
a
and there
very
are-
tricky part.
There are better and worse versions of it, definitely, right? There are terrible ways to do
Yes.
matchmaking, and there are much better ways to do matchmaking, but there's no such thing as like, we
Perfect
fixed
matchmaking.
matchmaking. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And so a lot of it comes down to the shape of a game. So what I mean by that is like, what genre is it? How does it control? Like these decisions you cannot easily undo in any reasonable capacity because they are the game, right? And sometimes people, they basically like the wrapper, they like the fantasy of the game, but at the end of the day, the actual shape of the game is not something that appeals to them, right?
Yeah,
So
you
it's
will
like,
see,
Or
for
it's
example,
incompatible with some aspect of their play style or something.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and like go look at Baldur's Gate 3, and you will find reviews of people being like, I mean, I hate turn-based games, but I gave this a shot, but I still hate it because it's turn-based. Thumbs down.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And it's like, what do you want the developers to do about this? Right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing to review a turn-based game for, is the
Right.
fact that it's turn-based.
It is. That is what
Right.
it is.
It's like, okay.
Uh,
But again, it's like, we read Amazon reviews sometimes, and some of them are just wild. People are like, the box came busted up. So
yeah.
negative
And then
reviews of product.
the
and you're like,
the seller's like, what do you?
I don't control the delivery man.
You know,
So
there's a
there's
titanium box for you. Or something?
yeah. So there's all this shit that you got to kind of sort through mentally. And so I guess the first question I want to cover is basically, how do you tell what is happening, and who do you listen to? Like when do you really want to listen to like kind of the whole player base and really be open to it? And when do you need to kind of like shut the windows a little bit? Because we're talking about how many dudes has a 90% review score, which is high. It's very high, right? So the question is, at what kind of point in terms of positive critical reception do you worry about whatever the gap is between your review score and 100%? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
and how much
none of
are
that.
you chasing a vanity metric, right? Because Steam has
Yes.
the extra thing of, hey, if you get 95%, then that's overwhelmingly positive. And of course, we all want our games to be overwhelmingly
yeah.
positive. But does that
But
just a
nine
vanity metric? Does that do anything for you?
I will say it is a vanity metric. Steam has explicitly said that they do not care about review score. And you could see
Yeah.
this. Unless the game is, unless it's a negative, that's the only time they start suppressing it.
Yeah.
The only
as in more people say you shouldn't play this.
yeah, I think
you
it's
know,
got to be like sub 50%.
It's like 30. Well,
Or
I think
30,
50
yeah.
is still mixed. You know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's got to be terrible.
Well, because Steam's
before
whole thing
it's
is like, are people buying this game? If so, there's enough people who like it, so we can keep
which is
showing
why you
people.
see almost every blockbuster AAA game on Steam has like a fucking mixed
They'll-
review
yeah,
score,
They'll
right?
be like in the 70s or something.
And that thing's
you know.
getting pushed just constantly
Yeah.
because people are still buying.
People still want it. I mean, yeah, it's like maybe it has some flaws, but
Mhm.
if it's people having a great time playing it anyway, and a lot of
Yeah,
people
and I
buy
would
it, then it's
expect
fine.
that there's an impact on conversion rates, people ending on the store. That if the same game was overwhelmingly positive versus mixed, it would probably convert to at least
Sure.
to some degree better. Who knows how much, right? But what about the gap between very positive and overwhelmingly positive, right? That
Yeah,
probably
doesn't really matter too
that's
much.
probably not doing a lot.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about like how do you tell what's happening, and how do you tell when you should try to close the gap, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how do we know what's happening? How are we trying to get a pulse
So-
on how players are responding?
So the first thing is like on Steam, you can just filter reviews by type. So you can say, just show me all the negative reviews.
Yeah.
As a
Mentally
developer,
gird yourself before
as
you
a
do
developer, you must do this.
Yep.
And also, it
As a human being,
fucking
it is
sucks.
the worst. Yes.
People are incredibly mean.
Yeah.
And they also will accuse you of things. So in
Yes.
some cases, like, it's like we have our Rumpus cloud saving system that people can optionally sign into. It's not required whatsoever. If they want a secondary backup mechanism for their saves and also to transfer their saves across devices, we will
And by
have
devices,
players
you mean
like
between
other
both
platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can already use,
Um,
because we are using Steam Cloud already, right? So you can already do it
Yeah.
between devices within Steam. Yeah.
So, we'll have players who discover that this exists, and then they will leave a negative review accusing us of trying to steal their personal data.
Or lying about the fact that there's a login on it, because Steam has a flag for if a login is required to play a game,
Right,
which
which
is
is
not
not
required,
because you
but-
don't need to use the service at all.
but
So
people can't read.
So people will accuse us of scamming, of lying, etc. In some cases, we also just got this on Android this morning where somebody bought the game and then they're on a super old device and it turns out that it doesn't run that well and then it crashed at some point. So they accused us of scamming. This happens a lot. Basically, if somebody has a bad time, then they'll accuse you of scamming it. Right? It happens a lot. So be ready for that. So you gotta kind of like filter out the sort of bizarre, hostile accusations that have no basis in reality and move on to focusing on things where trying to identify issues with the game itself. And
and unfortunately, many of the posts that are somebody, accusing you of something,
they include that.
Well, there's an origin, right? 'Cause they're mad about something that happened that might be a real complaint that
A game
you
crash.
want to see or want to address. Yeah. But they package it with just so much vitriol that it makes it hard to look at. It's like looking into the sun.
Everyone feels sort of like a weird conspiracy theorist these days. Like they're like, I had a bad time at this, therefore like big indies out
Someone
to
did it
steal
to
my
me on
personal
purpose.
data.
Yeah. As
So-
if like we would spend all this time trying to make something to give people a good time, but then purposely go out of our way to like ruin somebody's time,
Yes.
like
Also-
and alienate our customers. We don't want to do that. Like, we want everybody to have a good time.
I do want to mention, like, when do you actually engage with this? Because this is something I think it's hard to do. I think if you're a solo dev, it feels impossible to do, right? Which it feels like the default if you're just doing this solo. Like bring a friend with you, to be honest with you, to do this.
And by engage
stuff.
with, you mean reading
reply
it, not
to
reply
talking.
to.
or
Yes.
make a
Replying to it.
statement.
Yes. When do you
essentially.
reply to these things?
Yeah.
Again, this category of like what I would call a bullshit thing, right?
Yeah.
So
And Steam has good guidance, right? Which is basically like, you by default, don't. Right?
yes,
And
Steam literally tells you not to engage with your player base.
Yeah.
Straight up in the reviews
Yeah.
documentation.
And-
Like, do not respond.
And like we mentioned, I think last episode is that think of engaging with players as like when police read you your Miranda rights. Everything you say can and will be used against you.
Yes.
And we even had this, like we put out a post this week saying, hey, everybody, we're going to do a free 1.1 update. And several of the comments are basically saying, the fact that you pointed out it's free implies that the next one won't be. What are you guys up to? Right? So even just literally
my
saying
God,
something
no.
positive makes people go, the fact that you said something positive implies that the next thing you say
Yeah,
will
that's sort
be
of like the
negative.
purest distillation of this like fucked up relationship
yeah,
that
like,
some player
okay.
base has. Yeah.
And again, this isn't the whole player base. It's always just going to be this little vocal minority of people who are who take every single punctuation mark and word you use as bad faith, right?
Yes. So the question is, when
So
do you bother?
Be careful.
Yeah, be careful. And when you bother addressing it, and largely the thing that we do, and it's also what Steam suggests you do, is essentially only to respond to these really negative ones where misinformation is present.
And the goal
Because-
isn't to convince that person. The goal is to make sure that
Yes.
other people who see it aren't left with the impression
That's true.
that's
because
true.
and
Yeah,
you can kind of see how like reviews will have people flagging it as like, oh, I found this helpful or funny, right? Like people can like respond, drop little essentially almost like emojis on the reviews, and so the annoying thing is when we see stuff where someone's saying something that is literally wrong. So in this case, we had someone talking about the cloud safes thing as a way that we were like trying to steal people's personal data and that it was required for the game. Again, all of these things are incorrect. If I wanted to steal your data, I would not try to make a hit game on Steam to do so.
And also we do, we are
it's not happening.
GDPR compliant. We have all the information and our legal stuff on our site. Like it's all there about
Exactly.
what
It is-
we're collecting, what we do with it, which is
It is purely
you know,
because we are also game players and we like to play our own games from mobile and Steam, right? At this point.
we
and
don't have
again,
the
you can-
patience or interest in harvesting data and then trying to find somebody to sell it to. Like,
Correct.
that's just not the business.
insane.
That's stupid.
It's so, and again, like all we have typically is actually, we don't even have your email address because of how Adam's hooked up all this beautiful stuff in the back end.
Well,
So
yeah,
you log them.
because like Steam, if you log into our service with Steam, which we let you do, we let you make an account with us using Steam, right? All we have is your Steam user ID because Steam doesn't give us your email address, and so
We got nothing.
we can't communicate with you, which is actually a
We
big
can't
problem.
even send you an email
Yeah,
to,
we can't even
to
send you an email
verify
like,
your
hey,
account.
Something's
Yeah.
going on with your account. Do you still want it? Whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, so when we see this kind of stuff, then we do respond because you don't want people viewing it later. We saw that basically this review had like 5 people being like, "Oh, this is helpful," and I'm like,
This
"This
is
is
good
not
info.
fucking helpful.
Yeah.
This is literally completely
It's
incorrect.
lies. It's lies.
It's lies." And so we're like, and again, it's like the guy was saying, "You're angry about something," but it ends up becoming this like conspiracy theory. So
Yeah, and you
Those are the
can't
cases-
convince a conspiracy theorist of anything. So again, don't talk to them when you're replying, right?
yes,
You're
Talk
talking to
to-
the readers of that comment, right?
correct.
And you're addressing it factually, and you yourself are going to be an
As
ocean
chill?
of calm as you reply.
I mean, you're not going to feel like it
No,
when you're
you're not.
responding, but you gotta channel that shit.
Well, when you're just
Okay.
doing your best trying to give people a good time, and then people come in and essentially accuse you of being evil, right?
Yes.
It's it does make you a little bit upset.
It wears on the soul a bit. So we do this basically. We're like, okay, there's this review. It's actually causing problems because people are calling it helpful when it is literally incorrect. So we are going to respond, clear up misinformation. That's for the audience. That's essentially the only goal in those contexts. Because people are going to be wilding out always on these reviews. So that's like the one category. That's to me actually the easiest one to know how to deal with. It's the most emotionally devastating, but it's the easiest to understand where
clear
your
up
line
clear
is.
up misinformation.
Yeah,
If it is like if somebody makes a comment, a false comment, and then it just dies and gets buried and nobody's seeing it, don't even worry about it.
Yeah, it's still better to not reply. You need to have a good reason
Yeah.
to be addressing the misinformation. And so, like in this case in particular, someone's basically what is the word for just lying about something? Someone's motivations about things, right? Someone, I want to say blasphemy, but that's definitely not the right word. But there's a legal term
like
for it.
like a defamation,
like a defamation.
whatever.
It's like in that vein, right? But again, importantly, because if they just said like the devs are evil, blah blah, who gives a shit? But they very specifically are saying our login system is there to steal your data, right? Which is like that's a thing we need to make sure that people are.
And then it's required to play the game, which is good.
Yeah, none of that's
Literally
true,
incorrect.
and it's actually important that people don't think it's true, right? But
Yes.
because people are going to say wrong shit about your game constantly. Like the stuff that they're going to be mad about is because they didn't understand something or who knows what. And you shouldn't be replying to those, even though it's wrong, even though it is technically misinformation, right? Because the question is always, what is the impact of this misinformation if it hangs out here?
Yes.
And if the answer is like, somebody reading that would be like, oh, maybe this part of the game isn't good or whatever, right? You don't want to get in that space. You want to be focused just on the things that like truly meaningfully can have
Objective reality is fine
Well, this
to point at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this does come to kind of like another sort of form of feedback, which is the idea of conflicting feedback.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is, and like you can go look at the How Many Dudes reviews, and what you'll see is, in many cases, back to back, you might see like a negative review where somebody says like, this game is super easy, super boring. There's nothing interesting going on. There's no depth. There's no synergies between the dudes. None of your decisions matter. Thumbs down. Then immediately the next review will be a positive review saying, wow, this game has the perfect level of challenge. I love all the synergies between the dudes. There's so much depth. I've been playing it for 100 hours. It's so good, right? So you'll get two people saying 100% opposite things.
Yes.
Right?
And at that point, what you're concerned with is proportions, if this makes sense.
So if half your players are saying one thing and half are saying another thing, then there's some kind of way that you're probably framing things or portraying things that is just completely whiffing. And like if players come into it with good faith and really give it a chance and sort of dig up the design that you've buried on accident, then they'll have a good time, but not everybody's going to take that time. Right. Yes. And so that can just be kind of a sign that there may not necessarily be something wrong with the game, but that there's something wrong with kind of how you're portraying it.
Yeah, onboarding, how people are being.
Yeah.
Or again, it might just be the shape of the game, right? So a player coming in, enjoying the wrapper, like the fantasy wrapper in this case, like how many dudes does it take to beat up a gorilla? Sounds funny. Tons of people playing it. Okay, I'll get into it. But then not actually being the sort of person who vibes with the purpose, essentially the emotional core of your game, right? So in the case of How Many Dudes, the very purposeful emotional core of it is exploration oriented. It's just saying, what is it like to put together these different teams? And then how can you kind of manage to get them across the finish line together? And
it's a, what would it be like if?
Yeah, it's a what if simulator.
Game.
100%.
Yeah.
And what we've seen so far is basically that there's the predominant negative pattern in the game's feedback is along this dimension of that it, for some proportion of people, it's too easy, or it's too boring, or runs are too long. So all these are actually the same thing.
Yeah, it's all the same. Probably.
Your game cannot be too long. Your game can be too boring. I want to be very specific about that. Like, there's no ideal session length.
If it takes 2 hours, but it's a fun 2 hours, it's not too long. That's the right amount of time.
So if someone says your game's too long, it's because it's boring. There's something falling apart.
Yeah, and if someone says it's too easy, again, they're just bored again.
Easy is gamer term for boring. Yeah, it's just because we always talk about the idea of like the flow channel, right? So it's like when a challenge meets somebody's skill at kind of different points, it can be like if the challenge is beyond their skill, it's frustrating
and too hard.
And too hard. If the challenge is not meeting their skill, it's too low, then it's boring and easy, right?
Mhm.
And if it hits right in the middle, that's the flow
Right.
channel where it's like, this is fun, right?
But it's also more complicated than that too, right? Because some people just like it when things are too hard, and some people like it when things are too easy, right? So it's it's complicated, but the gist is that one, right? Which is
And,
So
and
that's
one
the
of
common
the
pattern,
and one of the kind of the curses right now in How Many Dudes
Mhm.
is that if you can choose to play in a lot of different ways because you can build your own team. And I would
Yes.
kind of liken it to if you're playing a game like World of Warcraft, and you go into a 5-man dungeon. There's all kinds of different classes you can play with. You can have rogues that stab things. You can have priests that heal people. Whatever. If you go into that 5-man dungeon and you bring 1 tank and 4 healers, so you got 1 person who takes no damage and 4 people who heal, then everything's going to take a really long time to kill.
Mhm.
And the dungeon will take forever, and nobody will ever be at risk of death at any point, right?
Yes.
And you will clear that dungeon, no problem, right? It'll take 3 hours, but no problem. You will win, right? And because you've chosen to play in this incredibly risk-averse way. Well, in
and
WoW,
some people have fun doing that.
Oh yeah, sure.
well, the thing is, in World of Warcraft, nobody has fun doing that because people won't. You can't get 5 people to agree to play.
Yeah,
like that,
sure.
Yeah,
right.
right.
But individual people, like there are people who would be like, that's how they want to just hang
Yeah.
out, have
They
no
want to
challenge,
just have no risk and just kind of just have a guaranteed win.
just get
right?
to the end at some point.
And so How Many Dudes? You can do that. You can say, I'm just going to stack healers and tanks. If you do that, then this is the experience you have, right? Where your
The
health
game is
bars
slow.
don't move, the game is slow, runs take forever. It's really boring, right? And so you can opt into that experience if you want. And similarly, we have like the business dude where you can invest your money to get a big payout later to make your team super strong. But if you don't do that and you buy everything kind of in the meantime, then your team is strongest in the easier parts of the game,
Yeah, in the
which
middle.
again is boring, right?
Yep.
But also tier 1 of the game is meant so that you don't is balanced so that you don't need to do those investments. So there's kind of like this compounding thing where we allow players to play however they want. And if
that's
a player,
the point. That's the game's
yeah, it's
whole
an
thing.
experimentation game, but some players will be far more interested in sort of the guaranteed win. Because if you want to do something weird, like, oh, I'm just going to only take crazy
Damage
damage
dealers.
dealers and see if I can kill everything fast enough to win, right? Well, if you do that, there's a chance that you lose.
Mhm.
And if you lose, then you don't get the gold stars at the end. And so if somebody is primarily interested in winning more than in experimentation, they will default to these kind of risk-averse play styles, which makes the game more boring, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of have this kind of cursed design problem, which we're working on some ways to figure out. But that's one of those like consistent points of feedback from the negative reviews is because people can opt into ways to play the game that just make the game not fun.
Yep.
It's just not fun, right?
Yeah,
And
and like there are people who do it on
you know.
purpose, definitely, but also you can do it on accident easily as a new player because some of the
know how
dude
everything
types
works,
very
so.
clearly this is a healer, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Some of them, what the fuck is this dude? You can't
Yep.
really
Yeah.
tell, and you
Yep.
pick it because you like the way it looks, right? And there's
we aren't sort of forcing the new player. We're not saying like, okay, here are the 5 dudes you're going to start with. And a lot of roguelikes do this where they rig the first even several runs with specific
Yes.
specific outcomes and specific events and stuff to guarantee that you have these certain experiences. And we haven't really done that in a big way with How Many Dudes. Behind the scenes, we do have a few kind of like little things where if there's like a dude that's really complicated, like the Lich,
Mhm.
we actually don't have that dude show up as a flyer option until you've had a run that's gotten past a certain round number. But just because the mechanics of the Lich are so deep that
We don't want you to have to sit there and read.
if
tooltips.
we hit
Yeah.
we hit you with that before you even know how the game works, you're just going to be like, what in the fuck?
yeah,
Right.
Yep.
So we do a little bit of those kinds of things. But we aren't interested in saying like, oh, like once you have a healer on your team, we're just never going to show you another healer.
Yeah,
You know?
but also
'Cause
because
there are
like
cool
every
comps
healer
to
is so
run.
and every healer is so different,
Yeah.
right? That like you as a first time player playing with like a chef versus like a
Mhm.
medic or something, right, is a very different kind of difficulty experience in terms of what that actually means. And so just being like, you can only have one healer Like that doesn't. And some dudes are not even like exactly a healer, but they have lots of healing. You know,
Yep.
it's too weird of a game for that kind of a thing anyway. And also, every time we tried anything along these lines during development,
to rig the randomness.
to
basically.
rig some of us with randomness, at least temporarily or for the whole time or whatever, to try to, because we identified things like this all the way through development of like, oh, there are like ways that the randomness can unfold that give you
a more boring result.
it's just something that's less ideal. Yeah. And so we're like, what if we just like tweak it so that that's just a little, that situation is less likely or whatever. And every time we tweaked anything, it made the whole game less fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's kind of, it basically becomes, again, it's a curse problem in the sense that it's just the other side of the coin of what the point of the game is. So that's an easy way to think about it. It's like, or it's a problem that is so endemic to the shape of the game that you're never going to fully escape it, basically, unless you just made something else.
Like matchmaking, right? It's
Like matchmaking.
There are worse ways it could be, and there are potentially some better ways it could be, but at some point, you're just trading one set of problems for another, and you can't really. There's not like a way just to solve it.
Yeah, but we think there is. We think we have a potential solution, which we're experimenting with. So this is a non-committal design discussion, as in this is something that we're playing around with the idea of for 1.1, but we're still iterating on the concept and stuff. Which is so our first move was to say, is there a quick fix for this? Because if people say the game is too boring, then as game designers we're like, that means it needs to be harder.
Yep.
Right. There needs to be more tension. There needs to be more challenge. Right now, the game's only mechanism to provide that is, aside from just you yourself picking a team that
is more
shaped differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game can provide that through the tier system. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, each tier has a higher level of difficulty.
Yeah.
But the tier system is also part of the progression system.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody's playing in Tier 1, they find it too easy, and we just let you jump ahead to Tier 2 or Tier 3, then you're essentially kind of like short-circuiting the progression, the meta progression system as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we experimented with that as a possibility, but when we played with it internally. We even put it on a beta branch on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel good to us.
Yeah,
and
we
the
asked for player feedback.
Yeah, and there's a handful of players who were like, "Oh, thank God! Like, I don't want to have to unlock things. Just give me everything." Right? Which I understand. But most of the feedback was, "Please don't do this. I really like how the progression system works." Because again, 90% of players are saying everything's great.
Yes.
And 10% of players are like, too easy, too boring.
So you're trying to find some kind of fix that could make it so you don't lose what is clearly working for the vast majority of people, but while making it so the people who are actually still sticking around in particular, there's a category of people who, the game isn't baseline quite challenging enough for them, probably because maybe they're really good at roguelikes or whatever, even beyond the idea that they're like choosing overly risk-averse teams. They might not be doing that.
They might just be really good at these types of games. Yeah.
And so they're seeing it then as like, okay, I have to grind through all the dudes in Tier 1 in order to get to the higher level challenge. Which is true, right? And in our minds, it was like, well, it's an exploratory game, so that's fun.
Yeah, like as you're doing that, every run, you're playing with dudes you haven't played with before. And
Correct.
So you're learning how they work
fun.
And stuff like that.
But for some people, it's not actually that fun. So, the first solution was, okay, let's just let people go to the higher tier, I guess, and see if that solves it without ruining, what we have currently. Yeah. But the feedback was very strong, actually, that was, people did not want that. Like the rest of the people didn't want that, right?
Well, it was basically the same ratio, right? It was like, about 10% of people were very happy with that change, and everybody else was very unhappy with it, right?
Yeah.
Because again, we're just like seeing the pattern of who the game is for and like how the game was designed and how it's meeting people.
Yeah. So what we're kind of experimenting with then as a potential solve for this, which is something that is not a quick fix and is something that we need to test ourselves and do a lot of work on, is essentially adding this idea of sort of a challenge mode layer. So this is something where, we have the 3 tiers. And if you imagine the challenge mode is sort of like tier 1 plus, tier 2 plus, right? So it's like you'll still have all of the same modifiers of difficulty in those tiers, but then there's this extra layer of difficulty that you can turn on top, probably with its own sort of progression track system that's kind of independent. So it's just a separate progression track.
Is the idea that would be, and that would not be locked behind like first
it would just always
tier
be
1
available.
and then. Right.
So so if you play tier 1, you're like, actually, this is too easy. You could just start playing tier 1 in challenge mode.
Right.
And then it's going to be a much harder version of tier 1. And if you get unlocks in challenge mode of tier 1, that would cascade back down to normal mode. So if you switch back to normal mode, then still have your progress.
Mhm.
If you decide, never mind, challenge mode is too hard for me or whatever. Yeah. And so by doing something like that, and at the moment, we're just thinking of it as just one layer of difficulty to lay on. It's possible that we might even play around with having a gradient. It's like, okay, maybe we have like challenge mode and then like hardcore mode, which is like an even
Right.
crazier version of that. Because in our development, we found even stuff like, so we've talked about this kind of in some of our design episodes, that the matchups use this enemy budget score, and that determines what types of enemies you fight and how many of them you fight. And a couple of months before launch, the different tiers actually increased that enemy budget. So tier 2 was 5% harder matches, and then tier 3 was 10% harder matches. And 5 or 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but it turns out the game is actually balanced on kind of like a razor thin margin in a lot of these places.
Well, and the reality is that in tier 2 and tier 3, you have to go 5 rounds deeper in endless, like into the hard
which
part of the
means
game.
you have to invest in the business dude more and more aggressively as the tiers go up, which means you have to sacrifice more relics in the short term. And so if your matchups are 10% harder,
they already are 10%. They're already like 30% harder, basically, because you can't have enough power, right? At those points,
and so, but the other kind of cool thing about this is if we kind of go about it this way, if you think about it, like challenge mode has its own upgrade, its own silver star, gold star progression track that's independent. So it's not stacking with the baseline, which is it's just its own. It's almost like playing the game over in a harder way, right? So, so if we do a 1.1 update and we add in this challenge mode, then we've also said we want to add some new dudes in 1.1. So this would actually say, like, if people want to play the challenge mode, they can basically like replay the game with the new dudes plus whatever balance changes we make with the new dudes and work their way back up through the progression system, but now in like a much more challenging way, right? And so so we're experimenting with something like that. Still just kind of like working through the ideation and initial prototyping phase of that.
Well, because the interesting problem here is that you always have the issue of how exactly you communicate this to someone, right? So that's the final piece, which is like, okay, so the game is about this exploratory aspect. Like that's where it's sort of played best, or at least at the start. And there's a portion of people who want a little more challenge. The problem is that when are you able to communicate that to them? If they've just finished a run that they were really bored with, and it took them like an hour and a half, are like, how do you signal to them that like, hey, you could kind of up the intensity here if you want? How do you do it from the jump too, without sort of like being overbearing about it, right?
Yeah.
But or making it confusing, but also still making it clear that is an option.
Yeah, that's like for a lot of new players, that means like maybe having a pop is like, hey, if you're an experienced roguelike player who likes a challenge, we recommend trying challenge mode first, right?
But even then, I don't think we actually do recommend that, right? Because it's not.
I would.
You would? Okay.
Yeah,
maybe
because it's essentially like tier 1 right now is set up so that you can kind of throw together whatever team, and you don't have to be too like crazy with your strategies, and a lot of times it'll pan out. So we'll still have people in the Discord who are like, yeah, like I'm after 7 attempts I finally beat the goat, right? So it's still plenty possible to have bad strategies, but if you're an experienced roguelike player who really understands the idea of like synergizing and like making these team combos, then you'll pretty quickly figure out some ways to succeed consistently. And so, I think if people want a good challenge where like they're always at the risk of losing, and that's the kind of experience that they want, then
and the thing is, you'd prefer to have them do that first and then be like, oh, actually, I'm gonna do the easier mode.
That was a little too hard. Let me go.
Then the other way around, because like oftentimes you'll lose someone if they play for it. If you're lucky enough that they play your game for like a full run, right, for a full hour and a half or something like that, and then they're like, they just kind of fall out, and you can't communicate with that person in any way at that point, right? They're gone. So that basically ends up being that's like the biggest element that we're really trying to address with then what'll happen with the 1.1 update.
There's more difficulty options that doesn't sabotage people's enjoyment of the current game, and also doesn't mess with the progression system of the current game, etc. but still opens up for that last 10% of players who are like, this is too easy. Can we give them something so that they can see the game the way that we see it, right?
Yeah.
And still experience the type of roguelike that they want, you know?
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, it always comes back to figuring out basically what's important about what's the core thing about your game. And then this almost becomes, it's basically an accessibility thing. People don't think about it like that because we're talking about making the game harder, right? But accessibility is just about meeting people where they are at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is like sometimes you do need to figure out some way to layer in how to make it what is like potentially a more easy experience hard from the jump, you know?
I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah. Cause it's like if a game is too difficult for somebody, you know, whether it's because of their baseline skill level or because of some other mitigating issue that they might have, we always think about that as an accessibility thing. If you literally just turn the dial to another part of the, you know, another part of the difficulty curve, now suddenly we don't think about it as accessibility. Now it's about being a hardcore gamer, right?
Right.
When really accessibility means, is this game approachable for this type of person, right? And if it's too easy, then no, it's not. Like nobody's going to want to engage with that. Right? So,
and there's still like, to me, there's like a fundamental question with the whole thing is about the actual solvability of this. Because it depends on exactly why these people are saying it's too easy.
Right.
Because if it's that they really get it and are just doing a great job with everything and things are working out in their favor, right? If that's what's happening, then sure, yeah, it is too easy, right? If they're playing really conservatively and boringly on purpose, right?
Yes.
Then they were trying to make it easy, and then it was.
yes.
So if we add a challenge mode, what, are they going to opt into that?
Well, the thing is that
Or,
the challenge mode will, for example, probably have some kind of mitigating effect that will make it harder to succeed with teams that can't do any damage.
No, sure, yeah. But what I'm saying is that so what a player then does, because what I'm saying is there's like a contradiction in this play.
Not everybody who's making this complaint is doing the same thing to make the complaint.
Yeah, and the ones who are trying to make it easy and then getting bored when it is, right?
Yes.
I'm suspicious that when it actually gets hard, that they'll actually have a good time either. I think that player can't have a good time.
If you're basically saying, I think that if, you know, because all I care about is winning at the end of my run, I'm going to take no risks and just play in the most, and stuff like this. I'm going to do the outlast strategy, just heal through everything and just wait it out. Right. Then that approach is essentially at odds
now they
with
won't
the shape
win.
of the game.
But they won't be bored while not winning. But what they want is to win, for it to be easy to win, but for them to not be bored.
But somehow be interesting also.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think like, because if there's going to be that, and that might be
that's always going to, but I feel like that's going to be a smaller subset of players.
Oh, yeah, hopefully,
you know?
yeah, who knows?
Because I think it comes down to if the first thing you think of just works, no problem. Right, where you're just like, oh, I'll just stack a bunch of healers, right, and then you win, right? Then the other kind of issue you have is people who kind of think that they've solved it, right? Where it's like, oh, that's just how you win the game. But of course, for them to find out that strategy will not work in higher tiers, they need to go to the higher tiers to do that,
or even later in the game. So this was the interesting thing watching Northern Lion play, which we were stoked to see him play because like 50,000 people watching. But it was like comically frustrating because he was taking easy fights like
the whole time.
Most of the time.
He was playing in the most incredibly risk-averse way.
And then also playing at 1x speed, right? And so it's like it was slow. And then he didn't actually he got I think into the 60s, which is where the game starts to turn the heat up. And the interesting thing about, I guess I will say the interesting shape about how many dudes, because it's an auto battler, is that it takes a while before the failures of your strategy will become very apparent.
We basically give you like the first 2 acts is sort of like a grace period where
the first act is
first act is you're trying to get your shit off the ground.
The first act is build your team. The second act is
get it
get
working
ready.
A little bit. Yeah.
Right. And then as you get into the latter half of your run, that's when things ramp. And you start to pay the consequences for your earlier decisions.
Exactly. So he's basically playing on easy. He's literally playing on easy, right? And then, an hour into the stream is like, it's just kind of easy. I don't know. I'm bored. Like, I'm not really into it.
And it's like, bails. It just
Yeah, it
fails
depends.
on
It's
round
like-
62.
So,
or
I'm
something.
sitting there and I'm like, this is like, what a high, and then a low, like back to back,
Yeah,
Be
I
like,
know
oh, he's playing it.
Oh, he hates it.
And then he's like, oh, I'm bored. And it was like, the whole time I was watching, I was like, oh no,
Well, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, which is that like, it is the shape of the game makes it entirely possible to even accidentally play in an incredibly boring way.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And it was funny because, of course, like he's aware of this. He's a streamer. He's been doing this a long time. He was like, I'm sure the devs are watching and are like, why is he doing that? Why is he playing in this way? And his chat was people were yelling at him in the chat too. Being like, could
Take the
you
hard
do
fights.
do the hard fights?
Hit the 1.5x speed.
He's like, I'm sure. He's like, I don't know. So he just kind of like bounced. And it does those sorts of things though, where it feels like you're seeing someone who's in that category play, right? Where like for whatever reason, you didn't hit them, you didn't meet them where they were, just by happenstance or by even their own self-imposed whatever. And man, it's
but again, it's one of those where because of what he was doing, he wasn't going to choose like, hey, here's challenge mode for like.
I don't know. Maybe
You
it
know what I
would
mean?
have. I don't know. Or the
Yeah,
presence
but
of it.
even just the presentation of there being a challenge mode, and then if you are partway through your first run and you're like, this is pretty easy, I'm really good at this game.
While you're choosing easy fights.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to go to challenge mode, right? And then you go to challenge mode, and then you kind of get
All I'm
right?
saying is I think like the challenge mode stuff is good for.
It will not solve.
It's
the
good for
problem
players.
completely. Correct. Yes.
Yeah, but my suspicion is that there's just this mismatch between what the game is and how it's shaped. Because the other part of the complaint, which we didn't hit, but it's similar, right, is that one where because of like you're describing, like throughout the course of a run, your early decisions that were fine early, but that were already bad,
Yes.
right, don't demonstrate themselves as bad until the end game, right?
Yeah.
And so
Because
you
the game
can
has
have
synergies. So
so the game can feel easy and boring because like you're just winning, nothing's really changing, and then all of a sudden you lose, right?
Yeah,
and that's the
the
other
challenge
people
mode
have.
does change. So even with like that extra 10% difficulty bump, it means that the consequences of your decisions will hit you very quickly. Actually,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
That's very true.
which is also kind of why we removed that from the higher tiers from baseline. But I do think that like for me personally, I'm really excited based on what I like about the game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm
I
excited
think,
about.
I think
challenge
this
mode.
is good. Like this is potentially good just for the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just suspicious if it'll act meaningfully like pull in that subset of players who.
It's all about degrees.
Yeah.
It's essentially it's going to be of that 10% who are like, oh, the game's too easy and boring. Maybe a third of them will be like, oh, challenge mode, and then
Yeah.
that'll kind of
Yeah,
bring
get
them back in, right?
Well, and
again,
it
this is
also
why-
gives the community something to say too, rather than just be like, well, you just gotta play to the higher tiers, or you just gotta choose a more interesting team.
It is an option. Yeah.
They can just be like, yeah, just choose challenge mode.
Yeah, and if anything, like how many dudes? The whole point of it is playing around with options, right?
Yeah.
Just trying different things, and so instead of overhauling the whole game and kind of forcing everybody who likes the way that it currently is to come along to a new framework, it's, hey, here's just this extra thing that you can now do if you want to, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
if you don't want to play challenge mode, just don't, and it's not going to affect
Yeah.
anything in your current run.
Yeah, and
or
again,
your
like that,
Yeah,
where the game score sits is that's like a perfectly good spot for it to sit. We don't have to chase all
it's
of
a
that.
great spot right out of launch, and
Yeah.
and I think we can win over some of the haters with a 1.1, and I think we can make the game even better for the people who like it. So yeah, that's always the goal. But yeah, so ultimately, then kind of to encapsulate kind of the feedback thing, it's like you want to look for consistent complaints
Mhm.
from the negative crowd, right? But you just got to be careful not to, well, not to take it as gospel, right? Because like in some cases, people, like the Baldur's Gate example, if somebody hates turn-based games and they don't like it because it's turn-based, well, they were never going to like this game, and
Yeah,
that just is what it is. So some people will just bounce off the game, and it's really disappointing as a developer, but you don't
You
want to.
didn't make it for them.
Yeah, you don't want to try to tackle that
But
because
you
you don't want to
yourself
sabotage.
Have bounced off of games you didn't like.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
Like-
And again, it doesn't, and this is also why, for those who've been listening to our podcast for a while, every now and then we will do sort of a game review, but we actually use the nailed it, whiffed it scale as opposed to is the game good or bad? Because the question, like a game can do exactly what it set out to do, but a particular player may not like it because it's not their type of game.
Yes.
Or whatever. Like is Elden Ring a good game for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely not.
But Elden Ring nailed it because they did exactly what they set out to do. And for the people who are into that kind of thing, it completely delivers on that, right? And so when you're looking at that negative feedback, you want to try to figure out, like, is this sort of like a balance issue with the game, or just like a small tweak can fix it? Or is it actually just this player was never going to like this game?
Yes. And it's not for them.
And it's not really reconcilable.
It's basically, is the complaint common enough to be worth doing something about, or to consider doing something about, right? And then is it actually addressable?
Yes.
And is there a way to address it that doesn't impact what people do like? Right. And if you can't hit all those, then it's just fine.
All right. You just got to eat the L. You know,
well, it's not even an L. It's just like, then it's just not.
There was never going to be a W, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just
nothing.
nothing.
It's not about, like, it's not that the players are right or wrong, or that you're right or wrong, or whatever. It's just that not everything is for everybody.
Yeah, I
right?
think the reality is that your goal cannot be to get a 100% review score. Your goal should be to make it feel like you nailed it for the people who the game is for. And those are two different things. And sometimes it's, especially in the aftermath of a launch, it's very easy to get them confused because the emotional heat is high. Right?
Well, it's that also in combination with the fact that a launch is when the funnel is widest for who's coming into the game.
Yes.
Right.
That is
and
also
so that's when you're going to have the most people who the game isn't really for come into play the game, discover it's not for them, and leave a negative review. As time goes on, you get outside of the window where randos are finding a game they've never heard of, right, and giving it a try and then not liking it. Then now you're moving into a space where the people who are finding it is already the audience for the game, and those kinds of complaints start to go away. And so the question that you have at the beginning is, given that these reviews are coming from the people who this game didn't quite hit right, it wasn't really for them, and once you get outside that window, those people aren't going to really be present anyway. But that adds to that question of, like, is it worth doing something about?
Yeah,
right?
Should they be?
Yeah. And
Can you include them?
Yeah. So you're trying to identify, like, when you look at those reviews, it's like, are those people who actually could and would like this game, but there's something that's not matching that I can change.
We threw them a bone somehow. You know,
is there someone to do this? Or is this a person who just, like, really can't? And this kind of person is going to go away.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's a bummer that they spent their money on the game and feel like they didn't get their money's worth, and hopefully they can get a refund, or, you know, that
or
kind
even,
of
like,
thing.
Again, if it's just because we have, again, it's not, there's nothing wrong with a player saying this. That's not, like, the issue is not a player's emotional response to the game. Like, it's not really what we're talking about here. The issue is just the fact that, like, the game is a certain shape, and you got to figure out if changing the shape of it can accommodate them, or if
without ruining everything.
Yeah. It's like we have plenty of people in the Discord who are stoked about the change of unlocking tier 2 or tier 3 by default, right? Because they are in that category where they are enjoying the game. They maybe even have left it a positive review because they're like, I really like it. I just wish I didn't have to grind out all the tier 1 stuff, right? And so it's like, they are our people. It's just that there's some of them who are more extreme in that regard.
It always comes back to the why, which is like, a grind is not always a grind, right? It's like if somebody says, it felt like a grind because it was too easy once I figured the game out, then by layering in some new difficulty modes or something like that, then doing the exact same thing is no longer a grind.
Every game is a repetitive loop of actions. Every game is a grind. So the fact that it feels like it's not a grind is the magic. That's what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Unless you're talking about frog fractions.
I don't even know what's going on there.
That game's not a grind because every 3 seconds the game transforms into a different
game. That was
game.
an LSD trip, I feel like, you know?
Yeah.
It's like WarioWare, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like,
if nobody's ever heard, for our listeners who haven't heard of frog fractions, go check out frog fractions.
Well, honestly, this is like a very mini aside. I don't think we're going to get that far, but I feel like this is also why the Friend Slap games are both so popular and also so easy to make, because there's not a grind associated with them, because you're just hanging out with your friends. There's no need to obfuscate a grind in terms of, like, progression shit and all that, because the whole point is just to play. It's so pure from a design standpoint, right? It is to play.
Yeah, and like progression systems do essentially facilitate a grind, because, like, something we'll have is like in the demo, people are like, well, I wish there was more of a progression system, you know, and then you add a progression system and be like, I wish there wasn't a grind. It's like, well, I mean, take your pick,
just let us try, okay?
Yeah. So anyways, That's all the time we have for this week's episode. I would like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can just go to podcast.bscotch.net. We have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, and links to the podcast archives. And of course, if you haven't yet, pick up a copy of How Many Dudes. It's out on Steam, Google Play, and the App Store. It's still on sale for a couple of days after this, maybe a day after this episode comes out. So if you haven't gotten it, then better start scrambling because
it'll go from being extremely cheap to cheap. So
somewhat cheap.
Get out ahead of it.
Yeah. So with all that, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.